Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make music like XXYYXX. As usual, you get the project file and samples for this video in the description, and let's dive in. So the first thing we have here are the chords, which sound like this. And so I'll show you the notes first. What we got going on here are actually just some basic major and minor chords. Nothing really out of the usual here. Basically, what I did was I took like major and minor triads, just like chords with 3 notes, the most basic form of the chord, like this one here, for example, this C sharp minor. And then what I did was I put the root note and the 5th down an octave, and then I also doubled that up here. And then I took the 3rd, which is the note in the middle, and just put that up an octave. And so it's just kind of like these basic, sort of like dark, I guess, minor and major chords that are being spread out across the keyboard, and that's what gives it that kind of like that like big organ kind of sound. It's just taking up a lot, not taking up a lot of the frequency spectrum, but it's taking up more of the frequency spectrum than it would if it was just like, 3 basic notes playing at any given time. So those are the chords. As far as the sound goes, what we got is I use analog, so I've got a sine wave, and then I've got a little bit of white noise here as well. Now, before I move on the sine wave, what we've got is I've got this pitch envelope here, so you don't hear it too much because of the side chain, which I'll talk about in a moment, but it's just kind of like at the start of those chords you can hear kind of like goes into the notes like that. Like if I turn off the side chain, you'll hear it. I was like that. That's what this is doing. So then after that, I have a little bit of a low pass filter, and you can see I got a bit of resonance here. So this is mostly for the noise, just to kind of filter it down, because what happens is if you just let the noise go, although it's very quiet, it's not really that pleasant when it's just kind of like super high pitched like that. So I like to just turn up the color all the way on the noise and then use this low pass filter to kind of shape it a little bit more so it's in there and it's still adding texture to the sound, but it's not like getting in the way so much. So then after that, I've got the amp envelope just set like that, just like a pad kind of sound. And then finally, we just have a bit of vibrato here. You can see I've got the rate pretty fast. That's what's giving it that like kind of pitch warble there. So then after that, I've got a bit of reverb, pretty straightforward, just to give it some space. And then I've got an EQ8, cutting out a bunch of the low end to clean this up to make room for the bass and the kick. And then finally, I just have this compressor side chaining it to the kick. And you'll notice I did a pretty heavy side chain here. This is the case with like all of this. This is kind of a cool thing for the style that I noticed, like with these really slow, kind of like trap, like dark beats, having that really, really strong side chain to the kick can sound really cool. So then the next thing we've got here is the bass, which sounds like this. So it's just a pretty simple bass, and then it's just playing the root notes of the chords, but you can see on this last little 3 here, I have this note, this G sharp, which is just a semitone down from there. It's just kind of like a cool thing because the chords cut out there, so it's kind of nice to jump to another note like that. Just kind of simple stuff. But yeah, so for the sound here, we just have a simple respace. XXYYXX uses this a ton, both in his older stuff and in his newer stuff. And so the way that I made this was with operator. We've got 2 saw waves. I've got a bit of detune on the second one, and then those are going into a low pass filter. And I should also add that I'm just using this algorithm in FMA, or in operator, FMA. In operator, I'm just using the algorithm where they're just playing, all the oscillators are just playing side by side. So there's no FM going on. It's just, 2 oscillators playing side by side. So then after that, I've got a bit of saturation. I just have to drive up a little bit to give it a bit more like grit and make it a little bit more powerful. And then finally, I just have a compressor side chaining it to the kick. The bass is pretty simple. You just really want something like big and powerful that really like fills up that low end. So the next thing we've got here is the kick, which sounds like this. So nothing really too much to this. It's just about having that kind of sparse pattern. And so the way that I made this one was by taking this kick, and all I did was I just put a low pass filter on it. You can see I have this one down here, and it's just kind of making it like darker and more subtle. That's really what you want for the style, like the more kind of subtle bassy kicks. So the next sound we have here is this tom, which sounds like this. So this is made just by using like a simple drum machine style tom. I took that one and I just put it into a simpler here, and then you can see what I did was I added a bit of a high pass filter to just cut out some of those like low frequencies, and then I added a bit of saturation. So this is where the kind of like crunchiness or like the dirtiness of the sound is coming from. Yeah, I'm just using a saturator and just kind of like overdrive it and make it a little bit more powerful. This is kind of a nice effect. Like if you take a tom like this and put it in some saturation or something like that, you get this nice kind of like gritty sound. And I've heard this in a lot of XXYYXX's music. So that's how you do it. So then after that, I've got an EQ8 and just cut out some more low end to be safe, I guess. And then I just have this reverb here. And then the reverb, pretty straightforward. It's just adding reverb to the sound. I just have it set like this. So that's the tom. The next sound we have here is this Rimshot, which sounds like this. So this is the kind of Rimshot like XXYYXX used a ton on his first album and still uses now, and it's definitely like a classic of this sort of genre, I guess. So the way that I made this I just took this Rimshot sample. I believe it's the Rimshot from a 707, if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, I basically just took that and put it in here, and you can see it just kind of alternates with this tom. So you get like one time it hits on this one, and the second time it goes to this one. And then you'll see also on the Rimshot I have a bit of delay. So this is kind of, I'm going to talk about that in a second, but this is kind of contrasting the tom. It's kind of like the tom hits and it's got reverb, and then it's like call and response. Then the Rimshot hits and it's got delay. So it's kind of like a different vibe. So yeah, so for effects on that, what I have is I have a bit of saturation, just kind of beef it up a bit. And then you can hear and see I've got this ping pong delay on the 3 settings. So that's just kind of doing that delay that you hear. So the next thing we have here is this hi-hat, which sounds like this. So this is just like a pretty straightforward kind of like trap hi-hat, I guess. The way that I made this was by taking this hi-hat. So yeah, just like a short kind of nice trap hi-hat. And then I put it in here and I made like a trappy pattern, I guess. And yeah, really the key is like these little rolls. When you're at a slower BPM like this, like we're at 96 BPM doing halftime. This is really slow. You can kind of have more freedom to do like cool rolls like this that you wouldn't really be able to do at faster BPMs. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of that. And that's kind of what I did here with this pattern. And then like I said, it's just an 808 hi-hat or like a trap hi-hat, whatever you want to call it, in a simpler. And then I've got that going into the compressor, which is sidechaining into the kick. I felt like it was kind of standing out when I didn't have it sidechained on those first hits. You know, it felt a little weird, so I just added this. And then it just kind of follows with what everything else is doing. So then the next sound that we've got here are these 2 noises, which sound like this. I'll turn them up a bit so you can hear. So these are pretty straightforward. They're just kind of like some background noises, like some vinyl noise, I guess. It just sounds good in the background. This is a technique that XXYYXX uses a bunch, like putting noise like this in the background. It's a really good way to add texture and sort of like atmosphere to your tracks. So that's how I did that. And then I just have a compressor on both of those, sidechaining them to the kick, so you still get that like ducking and volume that everything else has. And yeah, so the next thing that we have here is this vocal chop, which sounds like this. So the key to these vocal chops is to get like the really low pitched down kind of vocals. Like you can hear, that's really like the XXYYXX vibe. Or like the super chill, just deep pitched down vocals like that. So the way that I did this here was I took these 2 vocal samples, those 2, and then I just pitched them down a bunch and started playing around with them. Like you can see this one is pitched down -8. And then I'm just taking them and taking like a few little parts and like reverse them, and some of them I've even pitched to different pitches, like here. You can see that's -3. And yeah, so you just gotta get some vocals and start playing around with it. Like there's really no other way to do it. This was pretty simple to do. It might sound kind of complicated if you're not like super familiar with this technique. But like I said, if you just get started doing it, like with any vocal samples, you could take these ones if you pick up the project file and samples from this video in the description. But yeah, like just get any vocals and just start chopping them up like this and pitching them down. It's really not too difficult. So that's how I did the vocal chops. Now, as far as effects on those, what I've got first here, I have this utility. So it's actually just turning the volume up. The signal was kind of quiet coming out of these little audio samples. So that just gives it a boost. Then after that, I have this auto pan, which is set up like this. So you can see I had the phase on 0, so it's just affecting the volume. It's not doing any panning effect. And then what I've got here is I've got this saw waveform with half notes. And then I've got the saw wave inverted. So it's doing kind of like a fake sidechain sort of effect. I've done this actually a lot on other videos to get like a sort of 4 on the floor sidechain. But here I'm using it to just make the vocals kind of like pulse like that. Because the thing is, we already have that sort of rhythm from like all the other instruments, which are being sidechained, like those two. But it's not really enough for the vocals. Like I also wanted to have something duck it out of the way on the 3. Like right there, where the snare hits. So I just kind of added this to do that, and yeah, I feel like it sounds pretty cool. So then after that, I've got a bit of reverb. You can see I just have it set like that, just giving it some space. And then finally, I just have a compressor side chaining into the kick. So those are it for the vocal chops. The main things I would say are, like I said, like the pitch down, sort of like smooth vocals, and then definitely that auto pan is important as well. Like volume effects are very important for vocal chops. I don't think it's like really publicized enough. Like people don't really talk about this, but if you really know how to play around with like auto pan or like LFO tool or Kickstarter, those kind of things, you can get really, really good sounding vocal chops. And yeah, it's just very important for that kind of effect, I feel like. So then the last thing that we have here is this little drum rack, which has some percussion in it. I've titled it Percussion. It sounds like this. So these are just some little percussion samples we've got from the 808. It's an 808 clave, and then an 808 rimshot. And they're just in there, and I just have them playing like this little pattern. So these two sounds I use a ton in XXYYXX's music, and they sound cool. Like they add some nice sort of extra stuff to the beat. If I turn them off, it's a little bit more boring, you know? Like these just kind of add some extra flavor to the beat, I feel like. So I don't usually use drum racks, but I do like using them for stuff like this, where you just have like a few percussion sounds that you want to just sort of have in the same volume range and the same frequency range. So for this case, it worked perfectly fine. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one. I just want to show you guys some techniques to make music in the style of XXYYXX. So that's going to be it for today, guys. So make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And make sure to like this video, as well as subscribe. You can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, as well as you can check out all my social media, which are on the screen right now as well. Thank you again, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.